You just mentioned that we don't need to make a judgment before, but doesn't that imply that they deprive the very poor from their shares?
I'm sorry if I did not mention it properly. What I was saying was that there is something called need. It could be hunger, it could be sickness, could be something else. I mean, a person has no roof, no ceiling, it's and no clothes. So if a person you come across himself for some reason, despite having some assets, is not able to take immediate action and satisfies me. So the fact that the person, for instance, is himself expected to pay zakat is not a reason for you to not help him. I agree. I mean, you've got to look for the person who's the most needy. But sometimes you may come across people who don't manage their affairs well. Help them out. Tell them that your affairs are not being you know planned properly. But in the meanwhile, while things are going to be in order and it's going to take 6 months or whatever, I'll take care of you, and you can decide that you can spend from your zakat funds or zakat funds. So it's a subjective decision. The decision should take into consideration two factors: how close the person is to you and how needy he is. Yes.
It's actually, there's a third factor in there which you mentioned, which is the proximity of relationship, the intensity of the need, and the qualification in that moment of that person, right? Or that family.
Right. Qualification in what sense?
Qualification, like we actually have enough cash flow available, but they're just not using
Yeah,
it. Right?
that I put in the category of need, But you're right.
Yeah,
If you want to describe it separately, that's fine. Yeah.
Probably we were a little late, so I missed that part. That you just mentioned 5% and 10%, but would you highlight the 2.5%, which is really there since our childhood? I have actually a few questions, so I just want to ask one time. Second thing you mentioned, Hazrat Umar Farooq, that he asked that take it, whoever doesn't give the zakat, the way Prophet was receiving out of Islam, but that was Islamic state, and we are living in a non-Islamic state. And the last question, which was a little bit turned out to a joke, that he said if you pay taxes and zakat, you're going to become poor. But don't Allah say in the Quran when He's prohibiting the interest and He says zakat, increase your wealth. So I think it should be our belief that whatever we giving, Allah will give us a back. But this is something taxes which belong to the government.
Okay. I mean, to the third question, I take my words back. What I meant was that, unfortunately, because there are many religious people, despite the promise of the Almighty, what they do is that they pay zakat properly, genuinely, but they evade taxes. And by evasion of taxes, I mean they tell lies. So far from the spirit that you are mentioning in your question, it's completely different as far as their attitude is concerned. I did mention towards the beginning that the most famous and well-known concept of zakat is the one that is on savings, which is 2.5%, 1/40th, which is on the wealth assets that you own and possess over a period of 1 year, and you don't use it, it's just your savings. So it could be cash, it could be gold, silver, anything. And there is a minimum threshold, which is 52 dollars of silver, not 7.5 dollars of gold, which is far more, dearer, far greater value. If you have got, from the point of view of Pakistani currency right now, today that I'm talking to you, 170,000 rupees or more, anything more than 170,000 rupees is going to be subject to a 2.5% zakat every year. So quite apart from that zakat on savings, there is zakat on production as well. That's probably when you join. There was a third question in between.
The Islamic state, when you said Hazrat Umar Farooq mentioned, if you don't give zakat, you're out of Islam. So should be Islamic state?
It should be a state. You see, I think if you give individuals the right to decide whether they're living in an Islamic state or not. And it's on the basis of that decision, they will be expected to pay zakat or not, while they will declare no state is an Islamic state. So, we have to pay to the state how bad, how evil the rulers are. It's their job. We have to pay zakat, and we have to try our best to correct them. That's a completely different, effort area that we need to focus on.
So, what when you talk about production, right? Like the world that we live in now, businesses are much more complex. Production is not easy to follow. There are investments, like internal, external, etc. Is there a way to kind of really look at it like more in a more simplified fashion, which is that the zakat is applicable on X amount of EBIT or EBITDA, etc., rather than kind of looking at the full production calculation?
You see, I have put across before you the basic. And I have also admitted that the real world is very complicated. Now, what exactly should be our approach is something that we need to sit down and talking about and flesh out something which makes sense and it's going to be, I'm sure, reviewable over and over again. But, to see that the spirit of the expectation of zakat to be paid by Muslims is to be followed, and we need to be careful in the manner we calculate it.
So just in context of the car, like the impression that we are at least I had, and I think most of the people around us as well, is the car is really a wealth tax, right? But this portion of production, it's not just a wealth, it's also an income tax. It's a combination of the two. So while you may be about like 175,000 Pakistani rupees, then the zakat is applicable both on your wealth and on your income, i.e. production.
Income has got nothing to do with your wealth. I mean,
No,
it's the savings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so two separate things.
You see, the confusion or the difference of opinion has arisen because what we find in the literature in hadith regarding zakat that was levied at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was on agricultural produce. Now, given the present times, the manner wealth production has taken many other different forms, it has to be decided. And as I said in my presentation, whatever decision you take is going to be an ijtihad, because it was not something that was there at the time of the Prophet. So some people will say, and many have said this, that zakat, or what people call ushr, which is zakat, ushr means 10%. Zakat or ushr is to be applicable on agricultural produce. And as far as industry is concerned, well, there's no mention in Quran and Hadith, and therefore we will go by whatever assets they own, and we'll apply the formula of assets. What we are saying is that that's not correct. When these percentages were given on agricultural produce, it was not agricultural produce only that was meant to be applied on. It was production processes. That's right. It was basically whatever you will produce, you will pay zakat on it. It was an agrarian, agricultural based economy, and therefore the examples that we have is that they are applicable to agriculture.
One last question. That it's,
You don't have to give about that.
it's so one of the other, in my opinion, misconceptions that I've heard is that if it's your primary residence, if it's your pension funds, on that zakat is not exactly applicable. And the argument is, I can actually put all my wealth in my primary residence and never really have to pay zakat. Or similarly, maximize my pension fund so that I never really have to pay zakat and minimize the amount of zakat that I have to pay on like my other fixed or liquid assets. So because I can significantly improve my uh, uh, style of living in order to minimize the zakat payout that I make, if it makes sense.
You see, you know, you can also add to it that some people would spend lavishly on their expenditure and come up with no savings. So they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
You know, a law has to be followed according to what the rules of the law are. The other ailments or problems of the society have to be solved in different other ways. If people are going for, you know, residences which are unjustifiably lavish, huge, expensive, uh, a state has a right to do legislation. But the Almighty has not, given in the law anything that if you apply the Sharia, you will say that, look here, this residence is not justified. You can't say that. But most clearly, there are many mentions in the Quran which condemn extravagant spendings. We talked about it in my last presentation. But honestly, when it comes to practical application of these concepts, like you talked about pension funds, as soon as you start talking about something I've not myself practically gone into, my mind goes blank. So I can just tell you a principle. You ought to own and you ought to possess the wealth on which zakat is applicable. You have to decide whether a certain outlay is actually in the category of you possessing it. I think the criterion would be, can you get it out? Is it encashable? Is it liquid? Its liquidity is easily available or not? So if there's something that is in your ownership and you can get it out easily for you to be able to spend on wherever you want to, then it's something that should be added to the total value of the wealth that you possess as your savings to calculate your zakat. But I'm sure that the real, problems and different categories of investments that we come up with in the modern times, they all have their own peculiarities, which need to be understood and discussed in order to decide whether the zakat is to be applied on them or not.
I think this is like all of these questions that are mentioned and the problems and different forms of taxation, all of that modern economy, modern state has already come up with the answers. In our emphasis on just because the label is not zakat, it's tax. I think that is the reason that we are unable to reconcile this. If we get out of that and just think about the taxation system, I think we can come up. Taxation system is not a perfect system at all, but you can always argue about it. You have the rights. But it seems an important state has come up with all different forms, and there is always a way some money out of that, which will go back to the state, which is there to provide all of these services generally and then
What we understand is, and obviously, again, there can be always another perspective on it. Allah Almighty has decided this matter once and for all. You are living in a country where the rate of tax is very high. Go to other states, Gulf states, etc. There are no taxes. Now, obviously, imagine the entire world was an Islamic world. It had to be one system. Is heavy taxation justifiable or no taxation? What is the right approach? I think the Almighty has given us this law, which, if we properly understand and apply it to the modern economy in the right way, it will decide the issue forever. Why? because it's from Allah. I mean, nobody can complain that we are giving more or we're giving less. I can tell you that we tried, some people made an attempt to calculate how much revenue we can generate uh, as a result of this understanding that I'm presenting before you. You know, production process, the entire production process is subject to 5% or 10%. Our understanding was that it would generate more revenues, at least in Pakistan, than what's happening right now. But because people think that, you know, zakat is only on savings, they don't apply it on production. So there's no concept of it. And what is worse still is that because of this confusion, a big, huge evil, which people don't even realize that it's an evil, the evil of tax evasion and telling lies and bluffing, it's rampant. And it's being done and practiced by people who are otherwise religious people. So, you know, we need to have a uniform understanding and application of the manner the state is going to generate its revenues. And therefore, the debate must go on. The discussion must go on.
Good question. So if you are saving certain amount of money every year for future use, you have, and those are then categorized as savings. You then again pay that account on that savings.
There are two possibilities. One is that you are saving and your saving is invested somewhere. Then it's not your saving, it's saving, but for zakat purposes, in our understanding, it's investment. And the dividend that you are going to get, or whatever returns, obviously, hopefully not interest, dividends, you will set aside 10% of it, no matter what the value, the amount of your investment. It's now your revenue, which is going to be subject to 10%. If you choose not to invest, well, I would suggest don't do it, because in that case, it's going to be 2.5%, which, you know, my understanding is it's a very simple calculation that unless you are able to generate 25% of your total investment capital, anything less than 25%, if you pay zakat at 10%, it's going to be less than 2.5% on your capital. And in this case, obviously, you keep increasing your wealth. That concept, I'm not challenging. That in itself is very valid. That Allah promises that your wealth, it increases when you spend in His way. That happens in ways, in manner we can't even imagine. It happens in amazing ways.
If your land is on lease, then would you still pay 10% on the produce? So this
You see, when you are leasing your land, you get an amount as lease, as rentals.
Mhm.
So 10%, as simple as that. Unless you are, obviously on lease, you are not working.
It's 10% on the rental.
Yes. No. Well, that's a huge amount. I mean, you don't talk about the value of
Mhm.
the land. That's not, it's on revenues, yeah.